Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts. The victims were in airplanes or in their offices, secretaries, businessmen and women, military and federal workers, moms and dads, friends and neighbors. Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror. The pictures of airplanes flying into buildings, fires burning, huge structures collapsing, have filled us with disbelief, terrible sadness, and a quiet, unyielding anger. These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat. But they have failed. Our country is strong. A great people has been moved to defend a great nation. Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America. These acts shatter steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve. America was targeted for attack because we're the brightest beacon for freedom and opportunity in the world, and no one will keep that light from shining. Today, our nation saw evil, the very worst of human nature, and we responded with the best of America, with the daring of our rescue workers, with the caring for strangers and neighbors who came to give blood and help in any way they could. Immediately following the first attack, I implemented our government's emergency response plans. Our military is powerful, and it's prepared. Our emergency teams are working in New York City and Washington, D.C. to help with local rescue efforts. Our first priority is to get help to those who have been injured and to take every precaution to protect our citizens at home and around the world from further attacks. The functions of our government continue without interruption. Federal agencies in Washington, which had to be evacuated today, are reopening for essential personnel tonight and will be open for business tomorrow. Our financial institutions remain strong, and the American economy will be open for business as well. The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible and to bring them to justice. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them. I appreciate so very much the members of Congress who have joined me in strongly condemning these attacks. And on behalf of the American people, I thank the many world leaders who have called to offer their condolences and assistance. America and our friends and allies join with all those who want peace and security in the world, and we stand together to win the war against terrorism. Tonight I ask for your prayers for all those who grieve, for the children whose worlds have been shattered, for all whose sense of safety and security has been threatened. And I pray they will be comforted by a power greater than any of us, spoken through the ages in Psalm 23. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. This is a day when all Americans from every walk of life unite in our resolve for justice and peace. America has stood down enemies before, and we will do so this time. None of us will ever forget this day, yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that is good and just in our world. Thank you, good night, and God bless America.
I want you all to know, you can't go any louder. I want you all to know that America today is on bended knee in prayer for the people whose lives were lost here, for the workers who work here, for the families who mourn. This nation stands with the good people of New York City and New Jersey and Connecticut as we mourn the loss of thousands of our citizens. I can hear you. I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you. And the people who knock these buildings down will hear all of us soon. The nation sends its love and compassion.
God bless America!
To everybody who is here. Thank you for your hard work. Thank you for making the nation proud. And may God bless America.
All of this was brought upon us in a single day, and night fell on a different world, a world where freedom itself is under attack. Americans have many questions tonight. Americans are asking, who attacked our country? The evidence we have gathered all points to a collection of loosely affiliated terrorist organizations known as Al-Qaeda.
This morning that a plane has crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center. CNN Center right now is just beginning to work on this story, obviously calling our source.
To learn the next day that he also repossessed her station wagon.
Back to you. That is, once again, a picture of one of the towers of the World Trade Center.
We can see these pictures. It's obviously something devastating has happened. And again, unconfirmed report that a plane has crashed into one of the towers.
Well, for one thing, he didn't have to deal with them. He had so much money that he could lay naked in a bed, blacked out room, talking on the telephone and do all his business. Everybody else was out there doing it. And on top of that, he was a sociopath. He didn't like people. He didn't like even his aides, who were the only
coverage. How much attention do 2.5 million dead merit? It's a story we should have brought you long ago. This week on Nightline, we'd like to make up for that by finally telling you.
Robot got the chance to speak with him about his evolving style.
She's incredible, baby.
everywhere, so she was concerned.
Here are the rules for when someone would come into the room where he was staying. This is part of a memo. It says, before opening the door to the room, the man is to stand with a folded newspaper in his right hand, rapidly wave it for at least a minute to eliminate the possibility that flies will enter the room. Using 8 Kleenexes placed in the left hand, the man who's rapidly waving the newspaper will knock on the door. When HRH responds, the man will open the door using the hand with the Kleenex. I mean...
Right, as opposed to the dirty hand. I mean, hello, Howard, you know. The man was a bit compulsive, let's face it, but on the other hand, he was absolutely the most amazing man that America has ever created, ever.
Okay, I have got to interrupt you right now.
Sorry.
Richard Hack, thank you very much. We appreciate the book is called Hughes. We want to go live right now and show you a picture of the World Trade Center where I understand... Do we have it? No, we do not. We have a breaking story, though. We're going to come back with that in just a moment. First, this is Today on NBC.
Watch our...
What kind of plane? Was it a small plane, a jet?
It was a jet. Looked like a two-engine jet, maybe a 737.
You're talking about a large passenger commercial
A large
jet.
passenger commercial jet.
And where were you when you saw this?
I am on the 21st floor of 5 Penn Plaza.
Did it appear that the plane was having any difficulty flying?
Yes, it did. It was teetering back and forth, wingtip to wingtip, and it looked...
Stacey, we were talking earlier, as many of us have, that we remembered, of course, when the World Trade Center was bombed several years ago, and there was a, the amount of explosives did not bring that building, those buildings, to the ground. And we saw these planes crash today, and then saw these buildings fall. People were questioning exactly what happened, what could have caused it. We have a World Trade Center engineer who has a comment.
They're very strong buildings, as you remember from the blast the last time. So,
but what does it take as an engineer to do the? Oh no! Let's get ready.
As this man is standing here saying they're very strong buildings and that he expected them to continue to stand, we in the background see the buildings collapse, which again feeds that feeling that there was something else, that there may have been something else that brought those buildings down.
There was a lot of talk there in New York of another explosion prior to the collapse of the first building. When we talk about the World Trade Center also, we should say that we're really talking about, as my notes here show, 7 buildings, including the 2 twin towers, those huge structures, 110 stories tall. There was also a 47-story office building, which you told the viewers earlier this evening, Patrice, has also come crashing to the ground. It caught fire through all of this and finally succumbed to the fire itself, and it came crashing down. There's also an 8-story U.S. Customs office and a 22-story hotel, all in that complex. But right now, those 3 buildings, the 2 big towers, have down to the ground, and now also the 47-story office building. That's almost the size of the USX Tower.
Absolutely. I mean, it's...
And for those of you just joining us, as you continue to look live at the only standing tower remaining of the World Trade Centers, the second had collapsed not too long ago. Both have been hit by planes. We understand it was a 3rd explosion, however, that brought the tower to collapse.
What have you heard, if anything, about biological entities? There had been that issue raised earlier that perhaps anthrax and the like might have been part of this attack today. What have you heard?
Well, certainly there's a lot of concern of that around here. I haven't heard anything concrete where there is definite I won't even say speculation, definite feeling, if you will, that they believe that some sort of biological terrorism has been used. There's all kinds of speculation as to what has happened here. Was the plane loaded with explosives? Was the plane enough in and of itself to crash in the building to bring those 2 towers down? Because you'll see the video, and you've seen it 100 times. It looked like it was a controlled implosion. It didn't fall over. It looked as if somebody put TNT all throughout that building. It pancaked from floor to floor to floor.
Yes.
So, of course, there's speculation here that maybe these planes were loaded with C4 explosives or some type of explosives on timers. That if the plane itself didn't bring it down, that charges would go off and that eventually what happened would happen. But as far as biological attacks go, yes, it is a concern. How great of a concern, I don't think at this point.
The chief of safety, as I said, chief of safety of the Fire Department of New York City, told me that shortly after 9 o'clock, he had roughly 10 alarms, roughly 200 men in the building trying to effect rescues of some of those civilians who were in there, and that basically he received word of the possibility of a secondary device, that is another bomb going off. He tried to get his men out as quickly as he could, but he said that there was another explosion which took place. And then an hour after the first hit here, with the first crash that took place, he said, there was another explosion that took place in one of the towers here. So obviously, according to his theory, he thinks that there were actually devices that were planted in the building. One of the secondary devices he thinks that took place after the initial impact he thinks may have been on the plane that crashed into one of the towers. The second device he speculates, was probably planted in the building. So that's what we have been told by Albert Terry, who is the chief of safety for the New York City Fire Department. He told me that just
earlier. The second tower of the World Trade Center collapsing. About 8 minutes after that, a fourth explosion at the World Trade Center, perhaps at the base of the building.
We certainly would understand, but keep in mind that what you're seeing on your screen right now is live. This is not tape at all. This is the only remaining World Trade Center tower. The other collapsing not too long ago. Both victims of plane crashes. The tower rather that has collapsed, though we are told, collapsed because of a third explosion.
And then back in New York City, the unthinkable. 2 World Trade Center, the South Tower, begins to collapse. Thousands of tons of burning steel cartwheeled into the streets, flattening everything in its path. There were reports of an explosion before the tower fell, then a strange sucking sound, followed by the sound of floors collapsing.
Credit, I guess.
Michael, stay with us if you would. We want to go back to Marcia Kramer, who's in the newsroom, for a further update. Marcia?
Well, we have a number of updates. Number one, CNN is now reporting that there was a third explosion at the World Trade Center, probably an explosion from the ground that caused World Trade Center 1 to collapse on top of itself. Again, there was a third explosion. It's unclear what caused it, whether it was a bomb or whether the first plane that crashed into the tower had somehow been booby-trapped with a bomb that was timed to explode later after the crash had occurred. But CNN is reporting that there was a third explosion that caused World Trade Center 1 to collapse within itself and then collapse on other surrounding buildings.
When the second tower of the Trade Center collapsed, 8 minutes later, another explosion at the World Trade Center. Apparently, bombs may have been placed at the base of those buildings. The mayor only saying he did not believe those blasts after the initial impact had anything to do with a gas leak. That was an initial report from the mayor. It has been, again, just over 7 hours since this began.
I looked behind me and I saw the building look like it was coming in on itself, thinking to myself, I can walk faster than this. It just went boom, and then there was a whoosh of black smoke. Could see absolutely nothing. I think I was about as close to God as I've ever been.
And police at this time and other officials, their role?
Their role right now was pushing people back. They were very much in a mode where they were trying to get people back from the scene. At the seconds before the explosion happened, there was another renewed kind of interest in really getting people away. Because, of course, out of curiosity, everyone's trying to get close. Everyone's trying to get pictures of the World Trade Center on fire. They started screaming, get back, get back. There's another explosion happening. I guess they were being warned on their radios that the top was going to come down since it was burning for the better part of half an hour. And they screamed to get people back. They started screaming, leave Manhattan if possible. Everybody leave Manhattan as possible.
I would like you to describe one more time what it felt like when that tower collapsed. What did it feel like to you on the ground there?
We were standing probably about 3 blocks away, advancing toward the scene to try and gather some photos and some videotape, and it felt like the entire ground shook. It felt like what it feels like to be in a earthquake. The ground was shaking, followed by plumes and plumes of overwhelming smoke and flying debris, ash, and pieces of the building. As the ground was shaking,
was there sound with this, Nina?
There's a tremendous booming sound, and then it just felt like a rumbling, but it didn't sound like an explosion. It sounded like a loud rumbling, and then the next thing we saw were the streets. The way the streets looked was just overcome by smoke, just plumes and plumes of smoke, like a bomb had gone off, coming up the street as people were racing to get in front of these clouds of smoke and not doing too good of a job. They were soon obliterated by the smoke, and then we could see them running out. But it advanced probably within seconds.
We've actually had a couple of people. We're having a hard time turning around our tape right now because our truck is full of dust. That's exactly how much dust we're talking about. Our deck is not working. However, I can tell you, we had a woman sitting in our live truck earlier who was literally covered in blood from her toes to her head. She was sitting in our truck filled with dust. She says she was actually on the 82nd. In fact, we just heard another explosion. We just heard another explosion a moment ago. So we're going to stay here as long as we can, but as soon as it becomes dangerous, of course, we will move. Let me tell you a little more about this woman. She was sitting in our truck.
Okay, talked to someone who was in the building, had just gone into one of the World Trade Towers when it all happened. He said from where he was in the lobby, there was a flush of debris and a flush of fire down one of the elevator shafts. He actually was singed, and he was in the lobby. This gentleman here, where are you coming from, Richard?
I was in the Century 21 building.
So you were downtown too?
Right. Our office points right at the buildings, and we're so accustomed to seeing people of all walks of life down in the lobby and everything, and every day, and then all of a sudden this happens at 9 in the morning, and fire came out from all sides of the building. And to us, we thought bombs went off or something, but apparently planes went. But it's a sad, very sad time for America.
What we're going to do is we're going to turn back to the tower right here. We're going to send it back to you, and of course what everybody is thinking is that our prayers are with the people who were in that.
Once you arrived at Greenwich Street, which is not too far from there, did you see either one of the buildings collapse?
Yes, I did. About 10 to 20 blocks up, I stopped to catch my breath. I turned and looked around, and the Southern World Trade Center began to just buckle. About 50 consecutive bangs, and it fell down like a waterfall. And after that, there was chaos in the streets. People didn't know what to believe.
And at 10:30, the second tower of the World Trade Center also collapsed. About 8 minutes later, there was a fourth explosion at the World Trade Center. Since then, the White House, the State Department, the United Nations, and the Sears Tower in Chicago have all been evacuated.
Earlier, the second tower of the World Trade Center collapsing. About 8 minutes after that, a fourth explosion at the World Trade Center, perhaps at the base of the building.
These women made it all the way from the 50th floor in the World Trade Tower.
We ran down the steps to the lobby. There was no lobby. Everything was torn up.
My boss ran out of the office. He said one thing, run. Everybody just ran. And we ran down the stairs. They told us to come back up the stairs. And we were like, come back up the stairs, are you crazy? So we continued down the stairs. We came outside in the lobby. There was no lobby. The lobby was totally gone.
Did you see other people?
People. There was a woman there with her face blown off.
Emergency units brought the wounded and dying to one of the closest hospitals, NYU downtown, which implemented disaster operation drills, setting up triage on the sidewalk.
All of the surrounding streets, almost all of the movement is northbound. People trying to get away from the scene of the explosions, fearing that there are more to come.
Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America.
According to Larry Silverstein, on the morning of September 11, 2001, he attended an appointment with a dermatologist.
Where were you on September 11th?
I was home. And the only reason I wasn't where I was every morning, subsequent to the 26th day of July, my mornings were spent usually at a breakfast meeting at Windows, an 8 o'clock breakfast meeting, Windows, the top of it, and then going down to visit with my tenants, my new tenants, at the Trade Center, getting to know them, understanding their problems and so forth, ascertaining how we could service their needs better, which is one of the first things you do when you acquire a property. You begin to meet your tenants and start talking with them. And so my mornings were spent at the Trade Center, and then by noon I was back uptown. And so that particular morning, because I have light-colored hair and fair skin, and I'm an annuity to the dermatologist, my wife, God bless her, had made an appointment for me at the doctor. And I remember dressing to go to the doctor. I'm finally saying to my wife, I said, sweetheart, I've got so much to do downtown. I got to cancel this. I've got to go downtown. And she said, you're not going to cancel this appointment. You're going to the dermatologist. And, having been married now to the same woman for 46 years, you get this sense of determination on occasion, their voices. And I said, okay, yes, dear, I'll go. And then just minutes later, received a telephone call to turn on a television set and witnessed this horrendous circumstance. The first plane hitting, and then the second plane hitting. Of course, with the second hit, it became obvious that this was terrorism. I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. And I said, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
3 years later, Silverstein issued a statement claiming that he had used the term pull it to refer to pulling the firefighters out of Building 7. But there are several problems with Silverstein's explanation. According to FEMA's building performance study, firefighters were never in the building. Preliminary indications were that due to lack of water, no manual firefighting actions were taken by the fire department. And these statements, from Popular Mechanics and the New York Times, confirmed that no firefighting took place in Building 7, and that the fire department had ordered firefighters away from the building at 11:30 a.m. Another problem is that Silverstein made no reference to the firefighters when he talked about Building 7 for the PBS documentary. Plus, after Silverstein stated that the decision was made to pull Building 7, he finished his sentence with these words.
And then we watched the building collapse.
This would indicate that the collapse of Building 7 was the direct result of the decision to pull it.
As you can see, Tom, behind me, the smoke's still billowing from the area where the Trade Center was. There's still concern about a building right there where there is a fire still going, and the police here still concerned that that building, too, may be in jeopardy. They continue to push crowds back, a block, another block, another block. They remain concerned that that building could fall as well. They're concerned about the way the wind has been moving.
We now have a report perhaps of another building here in New York that has collapsed. CNN producer Rose Arce is on the phone. Rose, what can you tell us?
Yes, there's another building very close to the World Trade Center that was hit by debris some time ago, and it appears to be on the verge of collapse. Also, that enormous plume of smoke that you see that's surrounding the building, there are suspicions that it's not all smoke, but that there is a gas leak within that smoke. And that has caused a tremendous amount of panic in this area. The police have been saying that they're now evacuating all of Lower Manhattan.
The Israeli foreign minister, a long-time Israeli leader in any number of governments, joining us from Jerusalem tonight, where it is a little bit after 11 o'clock, about 10 minutes after 11. Thank you, sir, for joining us. We are getting information now that one of the other buildings, Building 7 in the World Trade Center complex, is on fire and has either collapsed or is collapsing. And you, to be honest, can see these pictures a little bit more clearly than I. But building number 7, one of the buildings in this very large complex of buildings that is the Trade Center, there were, and that is the right way to put it, there were the 2 towers, but then there are a number of support buildings around it, retail spaces, restaurants, office space, garages. The trains come in from New Jersey, bringing commuters, taking commuters back, come into the complex that is the World Trade Center. And now we are told that there's a fire there, and that building may collapse as well, as you can see. We can see, as we look now back downtown, we can see the billowing smoke. It is extraordinary to us, I guess, is how long this scene has gone on. The smoke has not cleared at all. It has not lightened at all. There was that horrific moment when the towers collapsed, and then we've been in this sort of situation ever since, as the fires continue to burn. Rose Arce, one of our producers who has been slowly and diligently making her way to the building, described the fires that she saw in the area of the towers themselves, and clearly those fires continue to burn at about 4:15 Eastern Daylight Time today, in an unbelievable and awful scene in New York.
But, Peter, there is a new concern, according to authorities at this moment here in Lower Manhattan, and that is the growing fear that another building in the World Trade Center complex, which was not struck by an airplane, is in danger of collapsing. That is number 7 World Trade Center, somewhat shorter, with somewhat fewer stories than numbers 1 and 2. There is a fire burning vigorously in the lower floors of that building, threatening the foundation. And the building was already damaged some 6 hours ago now when the North Tower collapsed, and part of that process of the building collapsing struck and damaged number 7 World Trade Center. So it was already at some risk before this fire grew as vigorously as it has. The authorities have now moved people several blocks away from that building, and we're just watching and waiting to see what happens.
Bob, is number 7 World Trade Center, and I see you've now managed to come down to the ground, and suggest things loosen up a little bit. Is that where the mayor's emergency headquarters are?
Peter, I honestly don't know, but I will tell you that number 7 is just behind number 2.
Now, more on the latest building collapse in New York. You might have heard a few moments ago I was talking about the Salomon Brothers building collapsing. And indeed it has. Apparently that's only a few hundred yards away from where the World Trade Center towers were. And it seems that this was not a result of a new attack. It was because the building had been weakened during this morning's attacks. We'll probably find out more now about that from our correspondent, Jane Stanley. Jane, what more can you tell us about the Salomon Brothers building and its collapse?
Well, only really what you already know. Details are very, very sketchy. There's almost a sense downtown in New York behind me, down by the World Trade Centers, of just an area completely closed off as the rescue workers try to do their job. But this isn't the first building that has suffered as a result. We know that part of the Marriott Hotel next to the World Trade Center also collapsed as a result of this huge amount of falling debris from 110 floors of the two twin towers of the World Trade Center. As you can see behind me, the Trade Center appears to be still burning. We see these huge clouds of smoke and ash, and we know that behind that there's an empty piece of what was a very familiar New York skyline, a symbol of the financial prosperity of this city, but completely disappeared now, and New York is still unable to take on board what has happened to them today.
Presumably there were very few people in the Salomon building when it collapsed. I mean, there were, I suppose, fears of possible further collapses around the area.
That's what you would hope, because this whole downtown area behind me has been completely sealed off and evacuated, apart from the emergency workers. That was done by the mayor, Rudy Giuliani, much earlier today, because of, course, the dreadful collapse of the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center. But New York, very much a city still in chaos. The phones are not working properly, the subway lines are not working properly, and we know that down there near the World Trade Center there are 3 schools that are being turned into triage centers for emergency treatment. And I know that over in New York Harbor, where the famous Statue of Liberty is, there's a field hospital where 1,500 people are being treated, and we have heard, though it's unconfirmed as yet, that 100 New York City police officers have been taken there as well for treatment, but we do need to confirm those figures for the officers.
It's now, what, some 8 hours since the attacks. Is there any estimate yet available of the number of casualties in the World Trade Center?
I think we can only go at this point with the words expressed by the mayor of New York, Rudy Giuliani, that it's too frightening to think how many there could be. We know that it's about almost 300 people on the airliners that were used in these attacks. But you've got to remember, this was 9 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday morning. It's busy in downtown Manhattan, in the financial district then. The World Trade Center itself has 50,000 workers. There are tens of thousands of tourists who go up there every day. The figures are almost too frightening to contemplate. You can understand why nobody yet wants to put a figure on them.
Listening to the mayor, Rudy Giuliani, a bit earlier, one of his messages was, business as usual. We won't let this get us down. But presumably, a lot of Manhattan people must have fled the city to Long Island to get away from possible further attacks.
Well, a lot of people were certainly trying to, but you remember that very early on all the bridges and tunnels to the city as well as the airports were closed. New York was sealed, essentially. Now, we do know that the Long Island Railroad has begun running again to get people out of the city if they can, and people who can't manage to get out and perhaps lived in that area, they're being offered accommodation in empty school buildings. But
Ashley Banfield is on the phone with us again from Lower Manhattan with more on what is still burning there. Ashley?
Brian, I can no longer hear you, but I just want to reiterate for you, if we can zoom in past me, that building right there, the brown building, the tall one, is number 7 World Trade Center. I've heard several reports from several different officers now that that is the building that is going to go down next. In fact, one officer told me they're just waiting for that to come down at this point, that there's no way it's going to be recovered and there's no way that they can stabilize it. The building that is directly south of it is number 6 World Trade Center. It apparently... in fact, you were just told by police that you should move out of your apartment, Fabiana. Yes. You've got Carolina here?
Yes. They advised us to leave because we have...
Oh, my God. Look behind us. Please pan in this way. Please be careful of your baby. This is it.
That's the building coming down.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. No. No. Listen. We'll be all right. We'll be all right.
We're okay. Ashley! I think we're okay. Ashley, I think we're okay.
All right. We're going to have to move this way. We're going to have to move. We're going to have to move. That cloud is coming this way.
Yeah. Ashley, get out of there. Leave the camera on, man, if you need to, and get out of there. What we've been fearing all afternoon has apparently happened. We were watching number 7 World Trade, which was part of the ancillary damage of the explosion and collapse of the other 2. We've been talking all day about how fast these plumes of smoke move. And you're watching one on the move right now.
The second building collapses. Came back 20 minutes later, looking like the Three Stooges movie covered with plastic. I swear to God. But you got a good thing, Rick. That's some good shit. Then we went back there. Whoa, 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 whoa! Second building collapses. Came back 20 minutes later, looking like a Three Stooges movie covered with plastic. I swear to God. But you got a good thing, Rick. That's some good shit. Then we went back there. Whoa, 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 whoa! Then the second building collapses. Then the second building collapses. Then we went back there. Whoa, 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 whoa! Then we went back there.
Whoa, 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 whoa!
Back live, we have had little relief here. Take a look at this. About an hour ago, World Trade Center building number 7 collapsed. A 42-story building, weakened by the devastation that had occurred earlier today. No word of any casualties in the building. It was the one calamity that was not a surprise. Police had evacuated the area hours ago. Fearful building number 7 would indeed.
So how quickly was the city and the National Guard, I'm assuming or supposing, how quickly were they able to get all of those bulldozers and backhoes that are so necessary to move this massive amount of wreckage?
We saw that all accumulating by late afternoon. I haven't myself seen any of the National Guard yet, but by late afternoon there were dozens of fire trucks, these enormous pieces of heavy machinery like the front-end loaders coming on trailers, some of them. They were all in position here in these side streets out behind where the trade towers stood not so long ago. And at first there was a bit of traffic jam out here and real gridlock as the men in charge of coordinating all of this effort tried to figure out how to get things into position. But that's all been cleared up pretty much now. They closed down the city completely. There's also no electricity here except for the floodlights they've brought in, but there's certainly no civilian traffic here, so they finally have that under control. Of course, there's a very grim job ahead.
A grim job indeed, and it could be weeks. Thank you, Bill Blakemore, for that report down from
the city's new $13 million high-tech emergency operations center.
My director of emergency management recommended 7 World Trade Center.
Did you personally favor putting OEM where it was situated?
Absolutely. It was a virtual command center, and it was selected because that's where all the federal agencies were.
The Secret Service and the CIA were both located in that building. We talked to them. We did extensive security studies of the building. You know, the bottom line is that building was one of the safest buildings that we could find.
The Office of Emergency Management office, that bunker, it's a pretty elegant bunker, and nor is it underground. It was second and third floor, right. I think. That's out of operation at the moment.
Yeah, rendered useless.
Do you know what has happened to it today? Do you know precisely what's happened to it?
I talked to some folks down there, and my understanding is that a lot of the debris has fallen and has blocked the access to the building. I've heard some reports that they're concerned about the structural stability of the building.
Jerry, you, I believe, were instrumental in setting up a state-of-the-art disaster anti-terrorism center, which was located in the World Trade Center, correct?
It's 7 World Trade Center.
Have we lost that now?
We have.
Your emergency command center, what some people have called a bunker, was located, was it not, in one of the World Trade Center buildings?
It was located close enough to it so that it was affected by it. It's not in one of the buildings, but it was located right in that area, as is City Hall, the police department, and all of them had to be evacuated.
He decided to work out of 75 Barclay, a nearby building, where the police set up their makeshift command post. He headed there.
Did you go immediately to the Office of Emergency Management?
I went down to the scene, and we set up headquarters at 75 Barclay Street, which was right there with the police commissioner, the fire commissioner, the head of emergency management. And we were operating out of there when we were told that the World Trade Center was going to collapse. And it did collapse before we could actually get out of the building.
And that is the building, Todd, am I correct in saying, where the emergency management operation was located? Not right now, but...
There have been some reports of that earlier, but it's since been told that's not the case. Again, the mayor and New York City staff going elsewhere to do their emergency management work.
The mayor, who's claiming to run on 9/11, built his OEM center, his communication center, the basis for all decisions to be made that had been attacked just 8 years earlier.
Mr. Mayor, 7 World Trade Center has already fallen down, one of the buildings that has collapsed. It houses OEM, several federal agencies, and within OEM, your bunker, your spot where you're supposed to be safe during emergency situations. What goes through your mind now that that's gone?
I thank God that I'm safe. I feel terrible for the people that we lost, some of whom I talked to just 15 minutes before we lost them.
And as far as we know, everyone had been evacuated from the building a little earlier.
I feel terrible for the people that we lost, some of whom I talked to just 15 minutes before we lost them.
And as far as we know, everyone had been evacuated from the building.
I feel terrible for the people that we lost.
So everyone had been evacuated.
Some of whom I talked to just 15 minutes before we lost him.
Ironically, that's the home to the city's Emergency Operations Center. That's the bunker that was supposed to be impervious to almost any attack, and the place where they would coordinate response to something like this. And they are without that today, and clearly without that permanently.
Feeling that loss significantly, no doubt, and the city's attempts to organize and coordinate the rescue efforts.
Also some Secret Service offices in Building 7 at the World Trade Center.
And that is also the building, isn't it, that the Mayor's Emergency Operations Command Center is in?
That's where the quote-unquote bunker is in.
The bunker. That would be the place to direct all of this activity in the case of a major emergency such as this one.
I was just thinking that if I'm not mistaken, remember several years ago, Mayor Giuliani moved the Emergency Management Office to one of the higher, to the 30th floor or around that area of one of the towers of the World Trade Center, and that's indeed the brain of all the emergency management activity. And now,
I believe, though, that's in one of the other towers. Ollie, can you talk to that? Ollie, can you hear me?
I hear you, Jim.
Dave brought up the point that the mayor's emergency management office, the so-called bunker, is in one of the towers of the World Trade Center, but I don't believe it's one of the two top ones.
World Trade Center 7. That houses OEM, the Office of Emergency Management. The bunker is in there.
I think one of the ironies about this is that the multi-million-dollar emergency system that was inaugurated, I think, about a year ago, maybe a little bit longer, is located where? In the World Trade Center, and therefore rendered fairly useless today, and they've moved to other locations temporarily.
One of my deputy directors got on the radio and told me we've just been ordered to evacuate.
Keep your eye on that building. It'll be coming down.
Building is about to blow up. Move it back.
All right, guys.
We are looking back. There's a building about to blow up. On flame. Debris coming down.
Just in the last few seconds, another building, building number 7, one of the buildings in support of the World Trade Center towers, has collapsed. This is no small building, as you can see, at 47 stories. It would stand out in most American cities.
After the Twin Towers collapsed, the adjoining building at 7 World Trade Center suffered heavy damage when the tower above it collapsed. Well, just before 5:30 this afternoon, it too crumbled, pancaking almost like a precision implosion. Ironically, the building had housed the city's emergency management office, which...
I got it.
You got it?
I got the whole thing.
beautiful, great.
I still do. Why are they running? Because it's coming this way. Huh? It's all right. It's safe.
So much. My name is Richard Gage, AIA. I've been a practicing architect for 20 years, and I'm a member of the American Institute of Architects. Let's take a look at World Trade Center 7 now. It was 47 stories tall, what would have been the tallest building in 33 of our states. It was not hit by an airplane. Let's take a look at the evidence of World Trade Center 7 and see how it stacks up against the typical features of a controlled demolition, starting with, is there a sudden onset of destruction? Let's listen to this emergency word.
We were watching the building actually because it was on fire. The bottom floors of the building were on fire, and you know, we heard this sound that sounded like a clap of thunder. Turned around, we were shocked to see that the building was, well, it looked like there was a shock wave ripping through the building, and the windows all busted out, and you know, it was horrifying. And then, you know, about a second later, the bottom floor caves out, and the building followed after that, and we saw the building crash down all the way to the ground.
Do we have a straight down symmetrical collapse into the building's footprint? Let's listen to Dan Rather narrate this collapse for us as we take our first look at the collapse of Building 7.
Now we go to videotape the collapse of this building.
It's amazing.
Amazing, incredible, pick your word. For the third time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
Let's take a look in this side-by-side comparison with a known controlled demolition on the right. Did the building fall into its own footprint? Pretty much so. Do we have demolition waves? And how do these remove the column support? Well, here's a floor plan of Building 7. Now, to bring a building smoothly, symmetrically into its own footprint without falling over, what we have to do is remove the core columns, because what we want to do is bring the outside of the building in on itself. Now, this involves a high degree of precision that fire is not capable of. Do we have a free fall speed of collapse through the path of greatest resistance? You can see second by second the building gaining downward momentum. You can plot the drop distance on a graph of time, and it fits the free fall curve almost perfectly. What does this mean? That the columns had to have been removed, and removed virtually simultaneously on each floor, synchronistically timed, so the building had no resistance virtually on the way down. Do we have a total dismemberment of the steel structure? We had a 47-story skyscraper compressed to 4 stories. Do we have sounds of explosions, though? How about Kevin McPadden?
This was boom, and like you felt a rumble in the ground, like almost like you wanted to grab onto something. That, to me, I knew that was an explosion. There was no doubt in my mind.
Do we have enormous clouds of pyroclastic smoke from the pulverized concrete? Watch the concrete entrained in the air racing down every street in each direction at 35 miles an hour. Do we have pools of molten iron? Here is Building 7 at A and B, and here is the North Tower and the South Tower. These hot spots are 1,340 to 1,370 degrees. These are the temperatures of the hottest office fires. There was no fire on the surface of Ground Zero after the collapses. What are we measuring here? We're measuring the molten metal that was seen by these first responders. Let's listen to John Gross, lead engineer of NIST, tell us about the molten metal from his perspective.
First of all, let's go back to your basic premise that there was a pool of molten steel. I know of absolutely nobody, no eyewitness who said so, nobody who's produced it.
You'd get down below and you'd see molten steel running down the channel rails. Like you're in a foundry.
Yeah, like lava.
Like it was lava
from a volcano.
No eyewitness who said so.
There actually melted beams where it was molten steel that was being dug out.
No eyewitness who said so.
Underground, it was still so hot that molten metal dripped down the sides of a wall.
Nobody who's produced it.
What is the problem here? Somebody's lying. I'm going to leave it up to you to make your own conclusions. How about chemical evidence, though? What produced all this molten metal? And what is thermite anyway?
Thermite. An incendiary used by the military, thermite is a compound of iron oxide and aluminum, which when ignited sustains an extreme heat reaction, creating molten iron. In just 2 seconds, thermite can reach temperatures over 4,500 degrees Fahrenheit, quite enough to liquefy steel.
Dr. Stephen Jones performed chemical analysis on the previously molten metal. Dr. Jones received no less than 4 separate samples of World Trade Center dust, some of it from Jeanette McKinley's apartment across the street, where the windows blew in and filled her apartment with dust. Another sample was found like 10 minutes later on the Brooklyn Bridge. Well, he takes this and he puts a magnet over it, and he finds that there are small particles that come up to the magnet. Some of them are angular, some of them are round. They look like this. If you had thousands of cutter charges going off in the columns and beams throughout the building, and they were under this incredible pressure, what you'd see is something like this. Tens of thousands or millions of tiny droplets. What's the shape of those droplets? When a liquid is dispersed like this, its surface tension forms itself into almost a perfect sphere. Would there possibly be any unignited thermite pieces in the World Trade Center dust? Indeed, he finds it. It also comes up to the magnet from his dust samples. Many chips. This one a 1/16 of an inch long, red on one side, gray on the other. The red side is composed of tiny iron oxide particles and aluminum. The Lawrence Livermore Lab came out with papers about this stuff. The particles being so small allow for almost instantaneous ignition between the two chemicals, the aluminum and the iron oxide, producing very explosive results. He continues his study and finds additional chips that are partially ignited, with spheres embedded in them. With Dr. Jones and his small team of scientists, through EDS, XRF, and WDS, identifies the components of these spheres and chips, predominantly iron, along with aluminum, oxygen, silicon, 1,3-diphenylpropane. The results, coupled with the visual evidence, he says, at the scene, such as the flowing hot liquid metal, providing compelling evidence that thermite reaction compounds were deliberately placed in both World Trade Center towers and Building 7. These results are documented in a peer-reviewed journal.
On September the 11th, enemies of freedom committed an act of war against our country. Americans have known wars, but for the past 136 years, they have been wars on foreign soil, except for one Sunday in 1941. Americans have known the casualties of war, but not at the center of a great city on a peaceful morning. Americans have known surprise attacks, but never before on thousands of civilians. All of this was brought upon us in a single day, and night fell on a different world, a world where freedom itself is under attack. Americans had many questions tonight. Americans are asking, who attacked our country? The evidence we have gathered all points to a collection of loosely affiliated terrorist organizations known as Al-Qaeda. They are some of the murderers indicted for bombing American embassies in Tanzania and Kenya and responsible for bombing the USS Cole. Al-Qaeda is to terror what the mafia is to crime. But its goal is not making money. Its goal is remaking the world and imposing its radical beliefs on people everywhere. The terrorists practice a fringe form of Islamic extremism that has been rejected by Muslim scholars and the vast majority of Muslim clerics, a fringe movement that perverts the peaceful teaching of Islam. The terrorist directive commands them to kill Christians and Jews, to kill all Americans, and make no distinctions among military and civilians, including women and children. This group and its leader, a person named Osama bin Laden, are linked to many other organizations in different countries, including the Egyptian Islamic Jihad and the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan. There are thousands of these terrorists in more than 60 countries. They are recruited from their own nations and neighborhoods and brought to camps in places like Afghanistan, where they are trained in the tactics of terror. They are sent back to their homes or sent to hide in countries around the world to plot evil and destruction. The leadership of Al-Qaeda has great influence in Afghanistan and supports the Taliban regime in controlling most of that country. In Afghanistan, we see Al-Qaeda's vision for the world. Afghanistan's people have been brutalized. Many are starving, and many have fled. Women are not allowed to attend school. You can be jailed for owning a television. Religion can be practiced only as their leaders dictate. A man can be jailed in Afghanistan if his beard is not long enough. The United States respects the people of Afghanistan. After all, we are currently its largest source of humanitarian aid, but we condemn the Taliban regime. It is not only repressing its own people, it is threatening people everywhere by sponsoring and sheltering and supplying terrorists. By aiding and abetting murder, the Taliban regime is committing murder. And tonight, the United States of America makes the following demands on the Taliban. Deliver to United States authorities all the leaders of Al-Qaeda who hide in your land. Release all foreign nationals, including American citizens you have unjustly imprisoned. Protect foreign journalists, diplomats, and aid workers in your country. Close immediately and permanently every terrorist training camp in Afghanistan and hand over every terrorist and every person in their support structure to appropriate authorities. Give the United States full access to terrorist training camps so we can make sure they are no longer operating. These demands are not open to negotiation or discussion. The Taliban must act and act immediately. They will hand over the terrorists, or they will share in their fate. I also want to speak tonight directly to Muslims throughout the world. We respect your faith. It's practiced freely by many millions of Americans and by millions more in countries that America counts as friends. Its teachings are good and peaceful, and those who commit evil in the name of Allah blaspheme the name of Allah. The terrorists are traitors to their own faith, trying in effect to hijack Islam itself. The enemy of America is not our many Muslim friends. It is not our many Arab friends. Our enemy is a radical network of terrorists and every government that supports them. Our war on terror begins with Al-Qaeda, but it does not end there. It will not end until every terrorist group of global reach has been found, stopped, and defeated. I said a long time ago one of our objectives is to smoke them out and get them running and bring them to justice. We're smoking them out. They're running, and now we're going to bring them to justice. I also said we'll use whatever means is necessary to achieve that objective. And that's exactly what we're going to do. The American people must understand that we've got a long way to go in order to achieve our objective in this theater. But we're patient, we're resolved, and we will stay the course until we achieve our objective. It makes eminent sense. I stand by those words. Afghanistan is still just the beginning. If anybody harbors a terrorist, they're a terrorist. If they fund a terrorist, they're a terrorist. If they house terrorists, they're terrorists. I mean, I can't make it any more clearly to other nations around the world. If they develop weapons of mass destruction that will be used to terrorize nations, they will be held accountable. And as for Mr. Saddam Hussein, he needs to let inspectors back in his country to show us that he is not developing weapons of mass destruction.
The Taliban in Afghanistan, they have offered that they are ready to hand over Osman bin Laden to Saudi Arabia if United States drops its sanctions and they have some kind of deal that they want to make with the United States. So do you have any comments?
Let me take that and get back to you on that.
Our position in this regard is that if America have evidence and proofs, they should produce it, and we are ready for the trial of Osama bin Laden in the light of evidence.
Are you willing to hand Osama bin Laden to the United States or not?
No. Without evidence.
Potential targets. The number one suspect, this man, Osama bin Laden, a radical Islamic terrorist linked to past attacks on American
The Taliban, the Islamic group in control, the conservative group in control of Afghanistan, believed to be harboring Osama bin Laden, denies that bin Laden is involved, saying he does not have the resources to have mounted this type of attack across the U.S. The Taliban also stating they don't have the resources to mount this type of attack, and instead saying that perhaps some foreign government is responsible. But the investigation to who is responsible for this will take many days.
Osama has no pilots, and where did he train them? Training of pilots is the work of a running government, and only such government has the capacity to do so. In Afghanistan, there is no such possibility for the training.
Take a look at some pictures, Lower Manhattan, as the efforts continue to salvage and perhaps hope against hope, maybe find somebody still alive under the rubble now, 47 hours after the first attack on the World Trade Center. The dust literally has yet to clear. 3,000 tons of rubble were carted away from that site by boat to a garbage dump in Staten Island just yesterday. A quiet, sickeningly quiet morning once again in New York as the smoke continues to rise off of what was the World Trade.
Molten steel.
Molten steel that was being dug out.
Underground fires smoldered for months, fed by molten steel.
Molten steel. Molten steel running down the channel rails. Like you're in a foundry.
Yeah, like lava.
Like lava.
It looks like a volcano went off, not a bomb. There's ash knee deep. It's the craziest thing you've ever seen, and the American public needs to see it. They need to see what has been done to this country. Not a bomb. It looks like a volcano went.
This is like watching the collapse of an active volcano.
Like lava.
Like lava.
I mean, you didn't find a shard of glass, anything that looked like would be used by a person. You just didn't see. It was just concrete, steel. That was it, and dust. And there were just thousands of guys on top of this giant mass of rubble with 5-gallon pails, just sifting through stuff, using bucket brigades.
You don't even know where to begin. What do I try to do first? I mean, it's monumental. The pile of rubble that's down there is monumental, and it's so big and it's so compacted that you feel minuscule, you know, and it's present.
Some of the debris from the collapsed building, even though it's been almost 23 hours since the building's actually collapsed. Some of the debris still blew up this morning onto the roof of a building in Battery City Park. That building caught fire. Firemen had to deal with that blaze. An already overstretched fire department in New York had to deal with it and did so. But that's the scene this morning in New York City with this pile of rubble, steel, concrete, a crime scene, but 6 stories tall.
They've begun using heavy equipment to haul away the wreckage of building number 7. Regardless of the fact that it's still burning. At the canteen, we hear some of the truck drivers complaining that some of these girders are so hot they cause the beds of the dump trucks to crack and split open.
It's still burning after months of rain.
This is how it's been since day one. Oh, it's unbelievable. And this is 6 weeks later, almost 6 weeks later. And as we get closer to the center of this, it gets hotter and hotter. It's probably 1,500 degrees. We've had some small windows into what we thought was the core at some point, and it looked like an oven. You know, it was just roaring inside. And it's just a bright reddish orange color. See that stuff he's pulling out? What was that, Chief? We're gonna hold off on the water. See the stuff he's pulling out? Yeah. It's red hot. If we hit it too much steam, you won't be able to see what he's doing.
You see how this debris is still smoking? That's from the fires that are still burning. 8 weeks later, we still got fires burning. Every now and then, one of the pieces of equipment will dig in, they'll open up a small area, the oxygen will rush in, and you'll get this plume of brown, black smoke coming up. That's because that fire just got more oxygen. So, I mean, these things are burning. At one point, I think they were about 2,800 degrees.
The fire hoses up top still pouring water on wreckage.
Grief counseling centers looking for information, that sort of thing.
We have specialized numbers for police and fire, but we have an overall hotline number that, in fact, I have it right here. It's 212-570-2730. 212-570-2730. It's the overall hotline number for people that want to get information about their loved ones. And we've opened up a center that'll start operating, at 8 o'clock this morning at the Armory on Lexington Avenue 26th Street.
Let me ask you, Mayor, about some real concerns last night about air quality in this city. The wind changed, and there were some real concerns about asbestos in the air for those rescuers down.
The asbestos tests beyond the actual immediate area of the site, in fact, the epicenter of the site, the asbestos tests are all negative. They're either very, very low levels that are not dangerous or no asbestos at all. The further away from the site you get, obviously the clearer the area is. Even though you get an odor that's an unpleasant odor, we've been testing it consistently, and beyond the immediate area of the site, there should be no problem. Now,
Wow, longer.
Are you concerned about asbestos contamination?
The health department has done tests, and at this point is not concerned. But so far, all the tests that we've done do not show an undue amount of asbestos. Doesn't show any particular chemical agent that we have to be concerned about. The accumulation of it for people who are down there can become very, very irritating. And there were a lot of people whose eyes have been burned. But I don't think there's any chemical agent that we have to worry about at this point.
Mayor Rudy Giuliani on the 10th anniversary of 9/11. While you did win international praise and were dubbed America's mayor, there was some criticism of you, Mayor, particularly families who feel you downplayed the health effects of the air. You said that, I think days after the attack, that the air was safe and the quality was not a problem.
Well, I didn't say that. I mean, what I did was put out all the reports that we had gotten from EPA. I think we had 5 or 6 different monitoring agencies, and I put out those reports. I never drew a conclusion about them. I just said these are what the reports show. I put out all the information that I had, including...
Well, why did then the EPA Secretary Christy Todd Whitman said that you ignored the warnings?
No, that's not right.
But that's what she had said.
That's not correct. We put out every single piece of information that she gave us with a lot of attention, and at no time did they give a warning, except one warning that we put out all the time, which was that if you were close in working, you had to wear a mask, and that would be dangerous. But if you were further away, according to their reports, they couldn't find anything in the air that was significantly damaging. So
this is CNN Breaking News.
We're just getting the breaking news about the health of 9/11 first responders. A new study just published, the study of firefighters, begins to answer a nagging question. Could cancer cases among those first responders have anything to do with the terror attack on the World Trade Center? Let's go to Atlanta. Our chief medical correspondent, Dr. Sanjay Gupta, has been investigating the health of these people for more than a year. Does it confirm what a lot of us have long suspected, Sanjay, that the dust that they inhaled has now resulted in cancer for many of these first responders?
According to the lead study author, who happens to be the physician for the New York City Fire Department, the answer to that question is yes. And I will tell you, that was surprising even to this lead study author who's been following firefighters, taking care of them for years, even before 9/11, and been sort of following them along over the last 10 years. This is a pivotal time, Wolf, 10 years now of data to look back and say what exactly happened to these workers, and was there changes in the rates of cancer? And what he found specifically was that there was a 19% increased risk of cancer among these firefighters, these first responders. And what was interesting, if you dig down into the study, as I did with him, he actually excluded certain cancers that occurred very quickly after 9/11-2001. He thought, could they be related to 9/11? Maybe not, maybe so, so let's exclude them. If you include those cancers as well, Wolf, the number actually is 32% increased chance of cancer if you actually were working on the pile immediately after these attacks. Pretty remarkable numbers.
Hi, so why are you here this evening?
I was actually, this really wasn't my choice to come down here, but unfortunately, working for the system, I got screwed by the system that I worked for. Under the mask and the glasses is a construction worker who was at the World Trade Center site the first week that the towers came down. I voluntarily, on my own, side by side with the FDNY, NYPD, and Port Authority officers, dug side by side with them using our tools, our dump trucks, our cranes, our pickaxes, our chain blocks, our oxyacetylene tanks to burn the steel, side by side with them as a first responder. 10 years later, I can't get disability for that. I can't get workers' compensation. I was diagnosed with stage 2 autoimmune disease called sarcoidosis. Everything you see in here are inhalers, painkillers, steroids, nasal, things to wash out my sinuses with, and all sorts of little goodies that a 34-year-old man should not be taking this early in his life.
Wow. Oh my God.
So my reason for being here simply is that I'm not just here for the first responders that got screwed like myself, but I'm here for everybody else, because as I'm here, I'm listening to other people's stories about them having financial difficulties and paying to the roof for college tuition, paying for their high rents, paying for school, selling their clothing and shoes and stuff on eBay just to eat. And it's enough. It's enough already. And it's a shock to me that as a union worker underneath this mask and glasses, that somebody like me can't get the same benefits of the people that help defend this country, like the ones behind us wearing the badges and the FDNY. They got all the pageantry, all the parades, and all the benefits handed to them, and somebody like me who was down there for as long as most of the day were can't get anything. I'm lucky I got the basic coverage, but it doesn't cover half of what's in that plastic bin. And it's not right. I can't pay my rent barely. I got to borrow money every week from my family and friends. I'm lucky I got that. My unemployment doesn't cover it. My union benefits are about to run out. I can't handle it. But just like most other people, you hear all those voices back there, they're in the same boat. So every person that's here, including me, has their own individual story, but it all boils down to money and somebody else having control of our lives. If only the people on compensation and disability said, hey, look, man, this guy's sick, was a volunteer, let's help him out, I wouldn't be here right now. But since the system turned its back on me, I'm turning my back on it until it helps me, just like these people are.
All right. Well, be safe, be well, and thank you for
And
being
anybody
here.
that's listening to this, particularly, where's my, I think I put it away. Oh, no, here it is. And also, I happen to be a member of Anonymous. If there are any Anons that are out there, I suggest you make your videos, go on to Anon Ops, go onto the IRC chats, whatever it takes, and spread it out. We need more of you down here. Don't just read it, whatever you see on the videos, and read stuff on the blogs. We physically need you down here. And tell your friends and tell other people that are active to get down here. Stop sleeping and do something.
Absolutely.
There's enough talk. It's time to do.
Awesome.
But do it respectfully. Obey the laws. Be respectful. But you do have a right to say your piece.
We begin with the skies overhead following the collapse of the World Trade Center. First, you see the dust, the debris, the mounds of dust on the cars. Again, this video comes from amateur videographers looking not unlike what you might imagine in a bombed-out Beirut. Again, the only thing to compare this video to that we have ever seen in this country, the bombing of the Murrah Federal Building where 168 people were killed, as we've been pointing out today. Casualties expected to go much higher in the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center. 266 people on board the two aircraft that hit the towers. The fact that it is silent makes it all the more eerie.
The FBI's 10 Most Wanted poster reads, quote, Osama bin Laden is wanted in connection with the August 7, 1998 bombings of the United States embassies in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, and Nairobi, Kenya. These attacks killed over 200 people. In addition, bin Laden is a suspect in other terrorist attacks throughout the world. It turns out, though, bin Laden has never been indicted for 9/11. And there's not a single mention of it directly in the FBI poster. Sheila Thorne in the FBI's New Orleans office told us, quote, the indictment could be superseded if necessary. In other words, 9/11 charges could be tacked on later for something many describe as the Pearl Harbor of our generation. As for why there is no mention at all of 9/11 in the FBI's 10 Most Wanted poster of Osama bin Laden, we wanted to get a comment from the White House as well. When we talked to a gentleman by the name of Blair Jones at the White House press office, he told us that we need to go back to justice, in other words, the FBI. We told him we wanted a separate comment, and he said, quote, we speak with one voice.
Either you are with us, or you are with the terrorists.
Just 9 days after 9/11, the president addressed a joint session of Congress where he blamed al-Qaeda, even mentioning its leader Osama bin Laden by name. Then came December 13, 2001, when the Pentagon released bin Laden's so-called confession video. The FBI revised bin Laden's poster 2 months after September 11th, and 5 years later, there's still no 9/11 reference. We asked retired Barksdale General Peyton Cole for his reaction.
It's puzzling, and it begs a question of why not.
And we're waiting for that answer too. Jeff Farrell, KSLA News 12 report.
The Central Intelligence Agency wants him dead or alive, but apparently the American-born terrorist with ties to the 9/11 hijackers has been a guest of honor at the Pentagon. Julie Kurtz joins us from Washington. You've got to be kidding me.
Yeah, here's what we know. Fox News has learned that Anwar al-Awlaki, the American Muslim cleric, remember him with a worldwide following, dined with military brass at the Pentagon within months of the 9/11 attacks. New documents obtained by Fox include an FBI interview conducted after the Fort Hood shootings. It states that Awlaki was taken to the Pentagon as part of the military's outreach to, quote, moderate Muslims, according to FBI documents. Now, the American cleric was interviewed at least 4 times by the FBI in the first week after the attacks because of his ties to the hijackers, but it appears none of this information was relayed to the Pentagon, where Awlaki had lunch at the Secretary of the Army's Office of Government Counsel. At this point, a Defense Department spokesman has declined our request for an interview, and it's not clear, frankly, what exactly the vetting process is at the Pentagon, which would have allowed a known associate of the 9/11 hijackers into the U.S. military's headquarters. We do know that currently Awlaki is a high priority target for the U.S. and the government of Yemen. He is connected to the 9/11 hijackers, the shootings at Fort Hood, and the failed Christmas Day bombing. So we'll have more on this as the day goes on.
That is a crazy story. With the Fox News exclusive, Julie Kurtz down in the Bureau, thank you very much.
I mean, I know he was on camera after 9/11 condemning the attacks, and he was someone people were looking at. So, I mean, that video's there. Shows how insincere he is, and you don't know who you're talking to.
On the FBI's mishandling of al-Awlaki, they apparently were running him as an agent, at least they thought, and they facilitated his removal from the country before anybody could talk to them. So,
of information about the slain al-Qaeda propaganda chief Anwar al-Awlaki, an American-born, where a congressional committee wants investigators to question the 9/11 suspects now being held at Gitmo. Did the radical cleric have a role in the attacks which killed almost 3,000 Americans? Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge live on this in Washington. What have you learned about who wants the 9/11 suspects questioned, Catherine? Well, good morning, Bill, and thank you. Fox News was first to obtain this letter sent by the chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, Peter King, to the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, asking that the 9/11 suspects, including Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the self-described architect of the attacks, should be questioned about the cleric Awlaki and 2 other men and whether they were in fact part of the 9/11 conspiracy. These are exclusive pictures obtained by the Fox Specials Unit of the Jordanian national Ayad al-Rababa, who helped the hijackers in Virginia in the summer of 2001, just 3 months before the attacks, and a Syrian national, Daoud Cheyaza, who is a close associate of the American cleric, the first American on the CIA's killer capture list. Fox News found the Syrian still living here in the U.S.
Are you religious?
No.
Then why would you go to
I'm
the mosque?
praying. I'm bad Muslim.
Anwar al-Awlaki, how did you come to meet him?
I'm very upset about that,
Right.
really. So everybody have to do something for them, really.
This is definitely a terrorist organization. The bullshit society, the suck cock society, there's everything here. But it's Silky, who I'm very proud of, with the Truth Movement. By the way, 9/11 was an inside job. 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 9/11 was an inside job.
Charlie, it's been claimed that you have truly fucked over millions of truthers whose money you took and whose support you used as a platform to launch your mainstream showbiz career. Do you have a moral problem with using, insulting, and demonizing these people?
No, I don't see any moral problem with insulting people.
Well, that's brief and brutally honest. Some say you sold out for a price. What would that be?
My price would be an inflated ego, a kind of heightened sense of importance.
The forthcoming BBC documentary is being called a hit piece. How did they set up the suckers and wannabes like yourself that went out there?
We were just led to speak to a bunch of official story shills to try and bullshit us. That they gave us honest answers.
Wow, you didn't cover that in your previous interviews. What would you say was the effect that this disinformation has had on your weak, gullible mind?
Just to say there's a few truths here, a few real truths straight from the horse's mouth. I've been brainwashed to promote anything that I don't believe in, which is why I've stopped promoting 9/11 Inside Job.
It's clear your arse is for sale to the highest bidder. Just how far does your internet messiah complex go?
If I were in control of the internet, I don't see any moral problem with promoting assholes and crazy people.
There are rumors that you've been begging for scraps from the Rockefellers. As a sociopath yourself, what are you hoping to gain from this evil family?
I think I'm easily led. Would I deal with David Rockefeller to deny the 9/11 conspiracy theory? My price, let the old fucker give me money.
So, a self-confessed sociopathic shill. On behalf of the victims of 9/11, thank you for your candor, Charlie Veach. Well, there you have it, folks. With subscribers deserting faster than fleas on a dead dog, and donations drying up, Charlie Veach has got himself corporate sponsorship. And all it cost him was a jar of Vaseline and some comfy
I'm in a Kohl's department store where I'm going to reverse shoplift. I have brought a donation, a nice t-shirt that I think that they should maybe carry. So I'm going to put it on the shelf and we'll see what happens. Okay. Well, I can't wait till someone gets a price check on that. You know, maybe they'll put it in the bargain bin and someone will get it for just a few bucks since it's not in the system. So, or maybe the manager will see it and, think about stocking some 9/11 Truth t-shirts. You never know. So just planting seeds, Just planting seeds, hoping they'll grow.
A California man opened fire outside the Pentagon right here in Washington, D.C., and today he's been linked to the 9/11 Truther movement. This is the movement that rejects the official explanation of 9/11. And joining me now right here is Jared Denman. He's from Washington, D.C. 9/11 Truther group, and he's going to talk about what this all means. So, Jared, media reports have come out today saying this shooter had a history of speaking out against the government and writing that 9/11 was government conspiracy on the internet. You yourself are a 9/11 truther. What do you think this does to your movement?
Well, first of all, I think that the reaction is it's blown a little out of proportion. First of all, we can't establish that this particular individual even wrote these comments online. Anybody can sign on to a website and log on and put some comments up. So as the investigation reveals more facts of the case, I think we'll be able to make a little bit better of a better analysis. So I think we need to wait. We need to hold off on judgment for that. But generally, what happens is in the 9/11 Truth movement, what's been happening is they've been focusing on just like a small part of the population, 5%. Those that take a very radical stance on these issues, and they're painting a wide generalization. They're using a brush of generalization, saying, well, look, this one particular individual had these radical views, therefore the whole group has these views.
So you're saying that there are far more reasonable people that share these views, they're just not getting the attention that this shooter is getting for them?
Well, I would even make a distinction. I would say that again, as the facts of this case come out, we have to wait and see what the authorities find. But I would say that the conclusions or the actions that we have to make a distinction between ideas and actions. I can have these ideas, but it doesn't necessarily mean I'll act on them. So I would say that people in the mainstream 9/11 Truth movement, no, they would not advocate violence, and there's nobody in the Truth movement that I've met that has advocated violence. So no, I think this is a mischaracterization.
Okay, and I want to talk about that violence that you're talking about, because this news comes just after earlier this week the South Poverty Law Center has released a report, and they group We Are Change, a 9/11 truther group that you're associated with, as a patriot group that is considered a non-racist hate group. So what is your reaction to this news? And moreover, I want you to dissuade me that you're this threat that the report seems to be indicating you are.
Yeah, again, all you have to do is go to a 9/11 Truth rally or an End the Fed rally, and you'll see the kind of people that you're dealing with. All you have to do is read the literature, go on the sites. There's plenty of documentation for all these things, and I think that that's part of the. At least part of my critique for the Southern Poverty Law Center and their report that came out. Again, I think that what they're doing is they're taking they're just mischaracterizing the whole group. They're conflating supremacist groups with with 9/11 Truth and the Fed and other very serious groups who want to get either a new investigation on 9/11, or they want to find out where the bailout money went, or why we have a central banking system. What are the pros and cons? I mean, the fact that the Federal Reserve hasn't been audited in a number of decades, that's troubling. It
certainly does seem that they all get lumped together. Now, I want to ask you, because you're involved in this movement right here in Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, the heart of the U.S. government that, you believe probably isn't releasing all the information on 9/11. So what kind of reaction do you get to your views right here?
It's mixed. Generally, I would say that most people are accepting. If they don't like the material, they're very polite and they walk on. I mean, very rarely will you get someone who gets very upset or angry, but that does happen. And there's ways in which okay, well, this is going to be a constructive dialogue. You give them a couple sites, maybe a couple videos to look at, and say, look at it on your own. And that's been my experience. So in D.C., it's generally been pretty good.
All right. Well, thank you for giving us that insight, and we'll certainly continue to follow this, as this weekend is the Treason in America Conference, which RT will be covering, which looks beyond the 9/11 incident and attacks and looks for deeper truth.
All right, that's all we got. Woo! Oh, to my amazing crew, sorry I've been stressed out this week and yelled at those PAs earlier and shot that guy up in the audience. You know it comes from a good place. I'd like to thank Fox and, of course, Seth and Julia Roberts. Sorry, the late Julia Roberts. There's one more star in heaven. 9/11 was an inside job. Good night, everybody.
Next speaker is Harold Save.
Mr. Mayor and Honorable Commissioners, we celebrate today the anniversary of the real Tea Party of December 16th, 1773, when the people fought back against financial tyranny against the ruling class. Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth now has 12,000 signatures demanding a new investigation of the mass murders of 9/11-2001. Gators 9/11 Truth has joined Richard Gage's organization as a regional action group. We have online meetup site where anyone can join us who's interested in justice. People are seeking justice, Mr. Mayor. Americans now living a life predicted by Naomi Klein in her book, the shock doctrine, the rise of disaster capitalism, Ponzi schemes, credit default swaps, worthless securities, legalized fraud, windfall profits from planned disasters. People who once believed 9/11 was a terrorist attack by a man in a cave are having second thoughts. They're beginning to wake up. They're asking questions and getting answers, solid answers about scientific proof that explosives were used to destroy the Twin Towers and Building 7. Proof that the FBI cannot debunk yet today. Too many of the newly enlightened are the families of soldiers who have paid the ultimate price, tragically, to profit an international banking cartel and the Federal Reserve. In the 9 years since 9/11, Americans have been repeatedly betrayed by elected officials. The criminal behavior of the banksters who turned Americans' retirement savings from 401ks to 201ks was rewarded when the President and the Congress supported the banksters instead of the victims, their own constituents. Betrayal when the government and the 9/11 Commission failed to hold a single person accountable for the 9/11 disaster. Later, members of the 9/11 Commission admitted they had been set up to fail. What? Set up to fail? The one single investigation into the 9/11 mass murders that sent America into 2 illegal wars, torture, Abu Ghraib, failed? This leaves the American people with no investigation, no justice. Of the biggest unsolved crime of mass murder and pretext for war in American history, Mr. Mayor, this is not acceptable. The Hurricane Katrina betrayal, where government response for New Orleans canal systems were deliberately set up to fail. It's time for a real Tea Party, Mr. Mayor. It's time to end the war. It's time for a new investigation of 9/11. Let's roll.
The next speaker is Bob Tuskin.
Good evening. Mayor Craig Lowe here in the city of Gainesville, Florida, has gotten a lot of slack lately over hiring his campaign manager, was it?
Please continue your comments.
And because of that, I'd like to make a few comments. Now, I'm not here to ask you to resign for that reason, although I think I want you to resign for reasons I'll get into in just a moment. Mayor Craig Lowe, first and foremost, I'd like to say thank you for all the work you've done for the city of Gainesville and the community here. I also want to say that in conjunction with your oath to the Constitution of the United States of America, I think it's important that I highlight that for a moment, and we'll get back to that in just a little bit. But first, to recap a little bit about the local controversy about him hiring his campaign manager or whatever it was. You know, this sort of cronyism, from what I understand, and the clerk commissioner of the commission should be able to answer these questions, and from what I understand, Kurt has a great background as a clerk of the commission, and I approve of him doing the right thing in this case. Make a long story short, it's against the rules, so you weren't allowed to hire him, and then you sent it to some committee in which you headed yourself. I want to remind the viewers out there that here in the city of Gainesville, from what I understand, the mayor's role is no stronger than any of the commissioners. It's a soft mayor system. And I was sitting down with the former mayor of Gainesville the other day talking a little bit about going back to just 5 commissioners. I think it's a great idea, and he concurred. But Mayor Craig Lowe, I'm here today to ask you to resign because of penalty of crimes of treason of misprison. Okay? If I was equipped with the right paperwork, I'd ask you to turn yourself in right this second. Okay? This is crimes to humanity and will not be tolerated. We need you to take a stance. I've notified you about treason and misprison, and you've refused to acknowledge these issues. What am I to do? But sit in here and rant and tell you, you need to turn yourself in or you need to act about this. We've asked you several times to comment. You've ignored us. You've stonewalled this issue. The least you can do is respond to my statement today. The least you can do. Make a statement. Tell us, stop talking to you about fluoride and 9/11 truth and the chemtrails being sprayed in the air that we all breathe. Tell us to go away. We never want to hear about your truth any longer. We don't like the conspiracies. Tell us something. But we're not going to sit here and let you smirk at us and ignore us and do all these things. Okay, so Mayor Craig Lowe, folks, for those of you watching at home, he shouldn't resign because he hired his campaign manager. He should resign because he refuses to address serious issues of public concern for the citizens of Gainesville and the entire world. Mayor Craig Lowe, please resign or turn yourself into the proper officials.
The next speaker is Ed Reyes.
Mayor. Okay, well, this is the town hall by KRLA. Got all their conservative hosts, Michael Medved, Dennis Miller, Dennis Prager, people like that. Of course, they're all in the bag on 9/11, and the idea that Israel was involved is just a bridge too far for him. But I'm passing out flyers that Israel, not Muslims, did 9/11. The headline is 9/11 was a murderous Israeli false flag operation with Jewish and Gentile American helpers. The Jews are called Sayanim. And I put together 4 pages of interesting stuff on that line. And I don't expect to convert anybody, but you know, there are passerbys that's been picking up, and you know, even some of the staunch KRLA types, they've taken some of my stuff. And when I look at it, when you're dealing with somebody that you know you're not going to convert or at least he's hearing this outrageous idea, perhaps for the first time, and in computer terms, as opening a new file or a folder in his mind. Now he has, somebody says that Israel did it, and so when he hears something, he'll go into that phone. So that's what I'm doing. People are staring at me and they're not taking my stuff. Maybe you take my stuff.
I'm staring at you and not taking your stuff. You're exactly right, but thank you. You're in the wrong place. Get a girlfriend.
Muslims did 9/11. If you disagree with me, have the guts to read the reasons for saying that.
Disturbing people that are trying to come to this event. I'm just letting you know, you're really disturbing people that are trying to come to this event.
Well, you know, maybe
what do you guys
when
do?
somebody offers somebody new ideas, maybe they should.
Yeah, but perhaps you should do it somewhere other than this event. Filming the lunatic or... They're here for an event to enjoy themselves and have a good time. They're walking in and they're
They won't remember me at all.
Probably not. Probably not. Huh? He's just annoying people as they're coming in. They're very annoyed. They're here to have a good time, not be harassed politically. That's all. I hope you have that on film. News, that'd be great. I need my face all over the news as much as possible. I'm not arguing rights. I'm not arguing rights. I'm just saying.
You want me to be polite?
I'm not the government. We're not the government. We're just telling you it's annoying. Well, I say half the people that are in there that have commented about how annoying you are, they probably do want you to go away. And they're
This is
they bought
America.
tickets over here, but they come to an event. They bought tickets to come to an event and don't want you to go.
Israel, not Muslim. All right. What a lame pitch that was. They're annoyed, so I can't exercise my constitutional rights because these middle-aged, middle-class people are annoyed. I don't know. I feel that every contact you make, even if it's a negative one, yeah. Here, sir, read something. Read it. Read about it. Don't just
Cut people's heads off, is that what they do? Cut people's heads off, is that what they do, these ladies?
insults are the last refuge of the out-argued. Israel, not Muslim, said 9/11. Not Muslim, said 9/11. Have we to read the other side of the
You get a prize for being ignorant?
You don't believe that. Don't get away from me. You don't believe that.
You're proud of yourself? I got another sign for him. About there, you have to think, what do you think she is asking you? You and I are at different ends of the spectrum. And then called me a filthy pig. I said, that is so rude.
I think that he saw opinion. I think it's been studied very clearly. You know, like it was Mechanics Illustrated, and hey, and it's on film. I mean, what happened happened, and it's logical, and it's not illogical. And, you know, people like him, I call them people like a wingnuts.
But if it's the damn truth, I'm not going to sit and wait for people to, for everybody to know about it. If you do that, you're not helping the picture, you know. You call somebody crazy.
You don't understand, my friend. I didn't call you crazy. I pointed to the sign and I said the sign was crazy.
You went like this.
Why do you think it's crazy?
Because it's based in nothing but rumor and there's no fact involved.
Well, there are books.
It's called paranoia. There's all kinds of books. There's all kinds of experts, too.
That's right.
I'm sorry, it's the way I feel. So you're telling me that you know how buildings are built and how all that works?
I didn't, but I studied it.
Oh, okay. Okay, then why don't you tell me what happened, since I seem to be so stupid?
I didn't see that. Well, they probably planned
Let me put it this way. Since you're inferring that I don't know what's going on, why don't you tell me what happened? Okay.
They use what they call the nanothermite.
Okay.
They actually found it in dust, unexploded nanothermite with little red specks. And they put it on their microscope and you can tell it was nanothermite.
Oh my God, did you hear that? What? Nanothermites. Jesus, I never knew.
Go away! Go away!
I made the point that if they could do as horrible thing as this, they could do 9/11 too.
Shall I step on him?
Stay away.
Stay away. Why don't you just walk someplace else? Huh?
This is America, isn't it?
And so don't I have a right to voice my opinion? So I'm just voicing my opinion. You have your right, and I have my right. I chose to exercise my right one way. You choose another. This is America. You're right. So don't deny me my right to act the way I choose.
But everybody have a right to make a speech and do what they wish, and you know, you can look them foolishly, and hopefully if they can convince you, or maybe try to convince him to change his mind, right? There's no point of getting violent. The poor old man is just nuts.
Why do I disagree? Because it's already been proven that the ones that did the 9/11 and flew the planes into the Twin Towers came from Saudi Arabia. All of them. Right? Isn't that proof? What is his proof? It's blind hatred. That's all that motivates your friend. Hatred. Hatred of Jews. That's it. No logic, no rationalization. Just blind hatred.
Back to him. It's crap.
That's an insult.
Israel, not Muslim.
And here's the other thing. You agree that had to be explosives in the building to bring it down. Well, now,
That's, I mean, a 10-year-old can do that.
could Muslims have done that?
No, that's an
It had to be.
I mean, Cheney called off the air protection. There's witnesses to that, obviously. But, I mean, you can't criticize Israel because then you're Nazi. That's the problem.
Because you're Nazi.
Yeah.
Well, I choose
So
to not be.
they were victims of the Nazis, but now they can do whatever they want.
Well, the
basically.
Russian.
You're obviously
I don't
not
need
well.
you know what? An insult is the last refuge of the
I'm not
uninformed.
insulting you. You're
That's you. That's you.
you're not well. I'll pray for you. I'll pray for you too.
9/11 was a murderous Israeli false flag operation with Jewish and Gentile American helpers. Okay.
Well, that's what I believe.
Yeah.
I didn't believe it 2 years ago, by the way. I didn't believe it 2 years ago. I was like you.
Right.
And I
And then you
learned.
had a stroke,
I learned.
and everything changed. Whatever it takes, just come back to us. Come back to the real world. Thank
Who
you.
knows? Who knows?
I lost my husband.
My son.
My uncle.
My nephew. September 11th, 2001.
Most people don't know a third tower fell that day.
The government says fire brought it down.
The collapse of World Trade Center 7 was primarily due to fires.
I, along with 1,400 other architects and engineers,
have found the government's conclusion to be physically impossible.
Impossible.
We need the truth about what happened that day.
Go to rememberbuilding7.org.
Why it fell, why it matters, and what you can do.